we have what's called a situation analysis unit profile that every unit does, which would be every county. They'll look at some of the demographic summaries of the county and just kind of get an idea of what the target audience is, and that helps them to identify some priorities going into the future. So, in the past, this has been done basically with a spreadsheet similar to the one that you see here, which is great for kind of looking at your individual unit. But it's not very, it's not very visual. And it also doesn't show regional patterns. So, while you're looking at your unit, there may be things happening around your unit that, it may help to inform you of some of your programming needs. And so both Shane and I were geospatial extension specialists, so we're kind of into the mapping world. And for us, this was just a natural bridge to bring this into like an interactive map. And so that's kind of where NEWT was born. That was to try to help with some of the updating, with some of the unit profiles. It's to help with some of the visual analysis. And we also, talking amongst ourselves and with some other geospatial folks in other states, we learned that other states had similar needs. So in 2015, we wrote a kind of a proposal and received some funding through e-extension to look at opportunities, and we initiated work on NEWT in 2016. So let's roll her on. All right, and so there are some other opportunities out there for mapping that have already been created at the county level, at the at the block group or the tract level. So one question is, why can't we just use them? And the major restriction is often licensing restrictions. There are a lot of commercial options, but they are either the data's licensed, the software's licensed, or a little bit of both. And so then there are states that have very good mapping applications for that state, but again, that's not national in scope or national in focus. So we were looking for something that was kind of consistent nationwide. And then there are some mappers that don't meet the specific programming needs of cooperative extension. So we tried to kind of create a mapper that brought all of these things together. And that kind of brings us to our goal. Our goal was to develop an intuitive national web mapping application tool designed specifically for the cooperative extension system, the National Cooperative Extension System. And that's a big thing. That's kind of a big thing to do because there's extension is so many things, but we had to start somewhere. So this is where we started. So some of our objectives were ease of use. We wanted this mapper to be intuitive. Needed to be cloud-based, which meant we didn't want people downloading software onto their laptops or their desktops. We didn't want them downloading data onto their laptops or their desktops. We wanted all of this stuff up in the cloud. And this is for various reasons. One, that way we could update the data once and everybody could access the most recent updated data. And two, we wouldn't have to worry about streaming down software updates all the time. And of course, we wanted it to be a national mapper. We wanted it to be flexible and scalable because extension is evolving. We wanted it to be a distributed data model, which means that we would be pulling data basically from their local source. So we'd be pulling data from the census, pulling it from the Census of Ag, pulling it from the Center for Disease Control. And that way, when the Center for Disease Control, for example, updates their data, that we're just streaming it. So if they update it, we stream their updated data. We're not like collecting data and archiving it and storing it and using it. We're using it directly from the source. And of course, we wanted to develop it by extension and for extension. And as I mentioned, this is a big job because extensions, it does a variety of things. So we tried to, we've tried to kind of pare it out into different categories, and we'll show you what that's about later.
Okay, I think that's on to me for the next section. And one of the questions I already got in an email was whether or not this tool could be used by people who weren't in cooperative extension. And I mean, it's something that we envisioned as well, is that there might be a lot of other people out there who have similar data needs or have the same struggles of trying to find data that they couldn't find, or having web applications that they didn't know how to use. And so there's nothing designed into the system whatsoever to prevent non-extension people from using it. And I fully expect that people who are not in cooperative extension will wind up using the tool. It might work perfectly for what they need. But we really wanted to make sure, at least from the development standpoint and the decisions that we made, that would be very focused on making sure this worked for extension. And if it happened to work for other people, then great. And we feel that some of the needs for extension may be specific, where you might really care about counties or extension regions where other people don't. But a lot of the common issues and needs that extension folks have, other agencies and organizations would have as well. So this was... The team that worked to bring this to life was sort of three in the end. It was myself here at the University of New Hampshire Cooperative Extension, and then John with Virginia Cooperative Extension at Virginia Tech. So we were the extension folks who were leading this to decide sort of the path. And the developers were the Center for Geospatial Information Technology, which is at Virginia Tech. So John was able to work with them directly at his own institution to actually develop the tool. And I'll have to say, there was a lot of back and forth between what John and I said and what they were able to do and were willing to do. And it has evolved, and did evolve tremendously from where we first started to where it is now. And of course, as we will mention at the end, there are some directions it could go in that would make it even better. But both John and I think CGIT folks, were pretty happy with where it wound up, especially considering the alternate, or the what it currently exists for these sort of web mapping tools. We found that this was very close to what we had hoped. And part of the idea behind how we decided what data we would get for this beta version, because in essence it is a beta version, was to talk to folks in extension, specific groups, and not say to ourselves, we're going to get every single possible data layer in here. We rather would have a tool that worked well for what it did, and it had enough data in that people could learn about it and explore and get a sense for it. I mean, maybe even use it tangibly. But we didn't try to get every single possible data layer in there, because we knew that if that was our goal, the tool itself would not be as good or robust, even if it had a whole bunch of data in there. So we had focus groups in Virginia led by John. I had one in New Hampshire as well, and we had some with a colleague who was originally on the grant in Texas that pulled together some thoughts about what sort of data layers would be most useful. And as John said, we wanted to make sure that this system could flex and grow. So it is really built on something that is a lot more powerful than what we're currently using it for. And so there's lots of potential in the future. We also wanted to give people the ability to chop up data sets and present them in the way that they wanted. So for example, here on the right, I'm looking at county-based data for the three westernmost, continental US westernmost states. And also, we really, as John mentioned, wanted people to look outside of boundaries that they're used to working in, whether that be county or state or region. And so we thought that even if individual states had very good maps and mapping systems, it was important to have a national map where everybody would be on the same playing field. And also, even if by accident, hopefully intentionally, people would look at neighboring counties and neighboring states when they were working to try to see what synergies could be found. Go ahead, John, you can say.
Oh yeah, so I don't know if you're coming to this later, but another kind of boundary or geographic entity that we've included with the program is extension districts. So we've developed basically a national extension district map, and granted, this hasn't been quality controlled. We're not sure if it's 100% correct, but it's the first national extension district map for the United States that we're aware of anyway. Yeah. So that's another way that you can kind of examine and analyze and visualize your data, is by extension district, if your state has a district.
Yeah.
Which not all do.
And John, just to make sure that I didn't forget that is the extension district state of New York. Or the extension district for the state of New York. Yeah, so keep an eye out for this. It's both in NEWT, and it's also available in something called ArcGIS Online. So we're going to be sending this out to the state directors and folks to help make sure that the districts that are shown in this are the actual districts. We did our best to make sure they were, but that's a next step that we're going to do as well. And we wanted it to have the ability to map, but we also found that with a lot of mapping systems, part of the problem is just too much data, and how do you find the right data that you're interested in? And I've seen this firsthand with some folks in counties, for example, looking for nutrition connections data, and they have so many data layers that they can't winnow down to the one that they want. So yes, we do. NEWT has a built-in mapper, which you can see here at the bottom. But where it really excels is the data exploration tool here at the top, which I'm going to step through in a minute and then show it live. And I remember very specifically in a webinar meeting that I had with the folks from Virginia, and they created this interface, and it was maybe 3 layers deep in the tool. And the moment it came on the screen, John and I both said, stop, that's it, that's the beginning. This is where we want people to start in order to be able to get access to data. So you don't have to be somebody who knows mapping or even understands maybe a lot of the technical natures of the data to be able to find the data you're looking for and access it in the way that you want to look at it. So the way that this starts, and I'll show you a minute live, but just want to show you here first, is you choose an extension area. Now, there could be debates about, does this encompass all extension areas, and how did the data fit within? We did our best for a first shot. This is one of the things that we're looking to get feedback on. But you sort of choose to start what your area is. And then when you go in and when you click on that button, it brings you into another section where it allows you to choose subcategories. You could choose one, you could choose all of them. And then when you click on next, it asks you for your geographic locations. So it can be based on counties, state, extension districts, and so you add them to the right to say, I'm interested, for example, in California, Oregon, and Washington. And we also thought it was really important, this is one of the times that they responded to us, to say, we don't want people just to be able to make the map of counties in one state. They really need to be able to stack and have multiple states shown, or multiple areas, or multiple counties, or by extension region. Then it shows you, here are the data layers that we have available based on all of the selections you've made so far. And if you hover over the name of the data layer, the details appear in the right based on whatever information is presented, as John made a point of saying, wherever those data layers are coming from, we're bringing to you what they say about the data layers. And you can choose all of them, or you can choose any individual ones. And then once you click next, you're presented with a list that provides this information. And by simply clicking on one of these topics on the right, it then loads the data into the map. So this is really just the data selection process to get the layers that you're interested into the map. And in addition to being able to zoom in and out on the map, find the values of individual counties or areas by hovering over them with your mouse, there's a decent amount of changes that you can make to the map. And also importantly, because we know not everybody is necessarily interested in the map, you can also get access to the data table. And I remember sitting in an office with an extension, a couple of county folks, and they said, oh, that's great. New Hampshire has 10 counties. What if we just want a data table with the information from 10 counties? We're going to have to hover with our mouse over each county and then write the values down on a piece of paper. And that's New Hampshire with 10 counties. Imagine if you're in Texas or some of these other places with a lot of counties. So we thought it was really important, even though in a way, to us, the most interesting and impressive thing was to present the map. We wanted to make sure that the data were also available as a table so that people could get the data in that format if that's what they choose to do. So I'm going to stop there to see if there are any questions at all. Accumulate or any people want to ask, either from myself or John, based on what we said so far. And then I'm going to switch over to actually using NEWT live to explore some of the things that we just discussed.
So yeah, I think we had a question, Shane. Yeah, so here's, are the data sources listed on the maps that we create? And I do not, well, yeah, I think they're listed on the bottom. I believe that below the map, you've got a, your scale bar, you can put a scale bar in there, a legend, a title, and I'm pretty sure that below the map, kind of the metadata or the, the source is in there. I'd have to double check that.
Well, and I think one of the things that we are going to mention too as potential future is that this is really designed to look at one data layer at a time. It's not designed at this point to look at multiple data layers. You can have multiple data layers that you can switch back and forth between, but from the mapping perspective, it's really only one at a time. But yes, as John mentioned, and you'll see once I get to make a map, the default text box on the bottom is the name of the data layer. But I think maybe the question was aimed at, the map you produce in the end, does it have that little text box that describes to you the data? No, that doesn't exist in this. Maybe future thought, we could think about that. The other thing I like to tell people when talking about mapping, especially online mapping, is people want to be able to print something from online maps. That's great, but a lot of online mapping systems aren't necessarily designed for printing or doing everything that you want to do. So if you can get an image out of your map by a screenshot or in any other way, you then could take that image and put it into any software, Word, PowerPoint, any image editing software, and go ahead and put on any text that you would like to on that map. So even if it doesn't itself do that, there are ways that you could make a map that would contain that information using this to do, let's say, like 95% of the work, and then export that and then add information in another program. But it is food for thought about directions. Anything else before we get going?
And so we've got a question from Sarah. How much did the system that you created cost? And
How much did it cost?
Yeah, how much did it? I want to say, was it 70? I can't remember, to be honest.
I would guess that it was between let's say, what do you want to say, 100,000?
By the time, yeah, I guess we got and the reason we're not sure is we got a couple little grants, but not all the grant went to NEWT. Some of it went to a couple of other projects. So yeah.
I would say between I think
70 and 100 is what I'd say.
Yeah, between 75 and 100, yeah. I would say that was the case. Yep.
Oh, here's Peter. Oh, here we go. So this is Peter Sforza from CGIT.
Good.
Who helped develop it. Yeah, he said it was built on many years of our work prior to this, and basically $100,000.
Good.
And I will say that CGIT, they're not new to the game. They've been doing this type of stuff a long time. So aren't starting, from scratch. We had some highly qualified people and programmers doing this, which, enabled us to get off the ground very quickly.
Well, and it enabled us to have it look as we envisioned, I think, which is not an easy thing to do necessarily when you have people who know about mapping, but not about the technical capabilities of the server software, and you have this vision, and then getting it to look very close or almost in some ways better than what we thought it would look, I think is a testament to how it went in the end. Okay, so I already stepped through this, but I just wanted to show it to you live. There's a variety of different types of data layers that you can choose. So let's just go ahead. I'll click here on agriculture. Also notice that down here at the bottom, this previous and next, you can hop back and forth between. So if you feel like you chose the wrong category, you could pick previous. And so you can see, at least based on what we thought, and we're looking for feedback on this, these were the types of data that were in agriculture. If you were in extension, you may be interested in these things if you worked in agriculture. You just click select all, or you could select individuals. And when you clicked on next, then it asks you to define a level of geography. So it could be by county or by state. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select counties. So notice that you have the by state and also by extension district. So for the moment, though, I'm going to use states. Maybe I'll choose those, some New England states here. So
let's go out west.
That's what I did for the screenshot.
Oh, okay.
I'm moving on to a different part of the country.
Okay.
New Hampshire and Maine. Just do 3. New Hampshire, Maine, and Vermont. Let's see. And I definitely think this is one of the sections where John and I felt pretty strongly about this, and it was awesome that they were able to adjust the software to make this happen. So we felt not only was it important to let people collect their own geographies, but also one of the things we hope this would do in the by folks using it is they start to look outside of the normal boundaries that they wound up working in. So you click on next, and then we have a whole bunch of different data layers. Now, obviously, this is something that if you were doing it intentionally, you would spend a decent amount of time going back and forth and trying to figure out what are the data layers that are here that are of interest to me. And this is maybe a little more haphazard. Hopefully it's what I'm doing is more haphazard than when people usually use the tool. Let's see, I'll just select some of these. And click on next and see what happens. Okay. So we've defined that we want these data layers, that we want this location, and you can see it tells us the year that this is that this was created, the data were created, sorry, the year the data represent. And of course, as John mentioned, we're pulling this data from a variety of locations. So there was an effort made by CGIT and us, but mostly by CGIT, to try to see where all the data sources they could get that met these requirements. And if it's in 2012, that's because the data layer was available in 2012, not necessarily because we decided that 2012 was the best year for it. So to add these to the map, you can go ahead and click, and it'll flip open to the mapping interface, and then it'll grab the data and show it on the map. Just so you know, too, from the front page of NEWT, if you say, forget it, I want to go straight to the mapping, you can always just click and go to the mapping interface directly. So here are those data layers, and as John mentioned, down here at the bottom, at least with this section, and you can pick this up and move this around, the default going to be here is the name of the data layer and also the year, although you can change this to say whatever it is that you would like it to say. Also notice, and I'll scroll down a little bit on the page down below here, that here is the table that shows all of the actual data, here this data value. So we're looking at milk cows as percentage of all cattle and calves. Oops, sorry about that. You have the data right there on the bottom in the table. Also notice when you click on this results here, this result tab shows all of the results that you've generated in that session. So even though you had to click on one to choose it to be shown here, you could go ahead and say, oh, I'm actually really interested on this section here. I want to see what that would look like and look at the number of horses and ponies. Or if you say, hey, I'm interested in more data, you can click down here and discover new data, or you can click back on home. So as you hover, you can see that the value is being shown in the upper left-hand corner, not only the value, but also the name of the county and the state. And there is a whole bunch of different types of things that you can change as well that are tucked up here. This may be enough for people, excuse me, to have this legend, the scale bar, and the name, and this map shown. But if you would like to change the base map, you have a variety of options that you can select. You can also choose a boundary overlay. So the United States congressional districts, which we thought could be really useful and important, or the state boundaries, or extension districts. And as John mentioned, this is the first time that we're aware of that this has ever been pulled together in one place and certainly made available electronically. And then you could also put up counties instead. Now, you have some control over the way in which these are displayed, and we won't go into too many discussions about the types of classification methods. I think the interesting thing, of course, is the color, and especially if you're trying to figure out like what's the right color ramp that you would like to use, and also what is that overlay color that you're choosing to have those boundaries show on top. And then with elements, you can choose to have a north arrow or not. You can change what that text is, and choose to have a base map or not and a map title showing. To get these out, as I said, you can always take a screenshot. And I mentioned that not as a way to go around sort of the built-in function, but people get so enamored of or worried about what that built-in function is that they sometimes forget the obvious. But you can also print this page right from the browser. So you could do print out with paper, or you can save it as a PDF, depending on how your computer's set up. And also notice that it does a nice job. Printing maps from online mapping software generally is pretty terrible. So this does a good job, and printing websites generally is pretty terrible. This does a good job of this, or again, you could always, using a variety of programs, take a screenshot directly from right there on your desktop. Okay. I know that's a little intense for my taste here. We'll back this off a little bit. It's not quite as intense. Okay, does anybody have any questions on any of that so far? John, do you see anything, or do you see anything, Mark?
Well, so the only thing I'd suggest, if you can, go down to your table and
Yeah.
So another, and this is, we're going to talk about this later, but I just thought I'd bring it up now. So kind of a future enhancement we're looking at, and CGIT's ready to hop on, is this chart view. So not only would you be able to, obviously you can download your table into Excel or into a beautiful PDF, or hit the PDF button, because this is really slick.
I just downloaded it somewhere. Let me open it and bring it into the screen. I have multiple monitors set up here, so okay, here we go.
Yeah, so you get this nice automatically generated PDF. You can download it as a CSV or pull it into Excel. So the table is, it's yours to do what you want to with it. But there's also the opportunity in the future, we're trying to enhance this tool to have a chart function that would, potentially show, differences, another visualization of values, another way to visualize it.
Yeah. All right. Well, those are the next two things I was going to say. So,
stole your thunder.
It's almost like we talked about this before, John.
John, I know you were addressing some questions. Did you see the ones in Q&A? Were you looking at those in addition to chat?
Oh, no, I wasn't.
So if you'll click on the Q&A button, you can see those.
Oh, all right. So you ready, Shane? We're lining them up here.
Yeah, go ahead.
So this is from Jeremy. What about inputting our own data? And Jeremy, right now we're, I'm not going to say that. Yeah, that would be something for maybe for the future. Right now we're looking at utilizing consistent databases across the U.S. So I'm not going to say it's impossible or that we won't do that, but that's not what's in the current demo. You agree, Shane?
Yeah, and I think that that's a possibility, but as we said, the goal was to produce this tool that did what we've explained and worked well with a certain number of data layers. Yeah, there's definitely more options that could be there. Once you input your own data, then you probably have to have an account, and somebody has to manage the accounts. But yeah, that's a common question, and I think it makes a lot of sense thinking about that for the future.
Yeah. So here's another one from Deanna. If the extension districts are wrong for your state, who do we contact to get them fixed? And at this point, I guess the best point of contact would be what?
I don't know, send to get in touch with either of us, I guess.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is the extension district map for states that don't have districts was shown as the counties. For example, in New Hampshire, we don't have extension districts. It's not regulated based on district. It really is on a county by county. And we had a big debate about what does that mean on the extension district map. And we chose, at least for this first go around, to make those counties be the district. So if that's the issue, then definitely let us know. But that was a decision that we made, which could be unmade in a future version. But especially if the districts are wrong, so the wrong counties are inside the district, definitely we'd like to know that. So,
all right.
Go ahead, John.
So here's a question from Audrey. Just now you are looking at Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont. Do you have to start over to expand the geographic range? Like, for example, would you have to go back, I guess, to the start if you wanted to add Massachusetts to your map?
As far as I know, can somebody correct me, John or Peter?
Yeah, there's Peter on there.
Expand the geography once they show up here in the results, is there?
I don't know if we can add to selection without having to go back at least a step or two.
I think you might have to go back from the beginning. I mean, there's an argument to be made, of course, that get the most data you could possibly want, although the more data you add to the map, the slower it could possibly be. And some of the slowness could be on NEWT's part, but to be frank, a lot of the slowness is based on wherever the data are coming from, right? So it's hitting these databases somewhere else besides Virginia Tech. And so if you added the whole country versus three states worth of counties, the map would load more slowly because it has to get more data. But
So I did get.
Unless Peter said something different, I don't think you can.
Yeah. So Peter did. He said, yeah, you'd have to go back to basically that previous step, the add geography step, and just add, Massachusetts.
Yeah. So yeah, you do have to start.
Not all the way from the beginning, but one step back.
Yeah.
All right, another question. Can all USDA, NAS, and other data be available? And I'd say yes, it can be available. The key here, though, is, right now we're looking at consistent databases nationwide. Right now we're looking at county level data. And it needs to have some kind of a FIPS code or something like that to tie it to a geographic boundary. There's all other types of geography. There's watersheds. But right now we're looking at counties. And, right now, we're kind of at a point where our funding is plateaued or we're kind of out of funding. So, we're kind of at a point where we can't add too much, too many more data sets right now until we can kind of get some additional funding.
Yeah.
And then here's another great question. Do you plan to include weather data files like precipitation, max temperature, I guess that's min temperature. And again, that would, right now we're looking at sort of county level data. That's not to say we can't do that. And, we could include raster data as Peter has mentioned. But, we're pursuing other funding sources to try to enhance this product.
Yes. And the question, of course, is that we don't know that we necessarily picked even the best data layers to represent the categories. We tried our best based on the data that were available, what we could find, what CJ could find, and those focus groups. But definitely weather was one thing that came up from a natural resource and a whole bunch of other sections. I think John's, what he said so far definitely speaks to why it's not there now, although technically it could be in the future, depending on what happens. And another question is, do I need to create an account in order to see topics for selected geographic areas? Yeah. So there is no, as of right now, there is no account creation process. So there is this section called My Extension, which was something that we thought could be useful. And the idea would be that if you wind up searching for data and data layers that you use typically for your job, it would be nice if you could find a way to gather those in one location. So every time you wanted to use them, you could go back just to the specific data that you're interested in instead of having to build it from the beginning every time. And so this just shows maybe what something like that could potentially look like. This is definitely one of those big future projects. And as we mentioned, it would require, to do this well, it would require an account and some differences within the software itself, although the software path that was chosen definitely left this open as an option. So as of right now, this is not a possibility, but it is one of those things we see as a great potential future development as we go forward. All right, is there anything else? If using reports, publication, presentation, what is the citation process for program and data inputs? Is there a citation summary description? I would say that the citation would be just the data layer itself. And I think you would find that back in the data exploration. This is just me off the top of my head. I don't know, John or Peter,
Yeah.
speak up. But the information that you find, let me just quickly put something in here. Let's just use continental. I mean, these are the data layer descriptions, and I think most of these are from census, but it might be nice to have the official, that's a good question for what the actual full type citation should be. It's a good question. I don't know that you necessarily need to cite the tool per se. What do you think, John? I think it's just a way of finding the data themselves.
Yeah, I see this as a data exploration tool that, we're pulling. We're not developing our own data right now. I mean, it'd be great if you could help spread the word about NEWT, of course, but I think we're kind of using other people's data, really, other organizations.
Mm-hmm. So, how can we access NEWT later on? Well, why don't we go go ahead and flip back over to this presentation and have John sort of pick up from here.
All right. So, and yeah, we're going to provide you with the link of how to access NEWT. But so we just want to get through. So that's kind of how NEWT works. And we didn't show everything. I mean, we showed 99%, but there's a few fun surprises along the way. So these are some opportunities for further enhancement for NEWT. We've discussed a little bit about having a My Extension login, where you could log in with a username and password. You'd have your own profile. If you were from Missouri, maybe you want to zoom, have your map already zoomed into Missouri every time, and maybe you're interested in agricultural products, so you wouldn't have to go through, it'd save you some steps, basically. We talked a little bit about the graphing and the charts capability, which we'd like to enhance, and that's not a huge lift. I think it'd be really interesting to look at a comparison of data over time. So maybe we have some data from 1990, 2000, and 2020, and just see what the trends are. Perhaps some advanced selection tools, some enhanced analytical capabilities, perhaps hotspot mapping, who knows, updating some data, including new fields. And I think we've already gotten suggestions for new fields already. So, and I think that's one of those things that may be kind of an ongoing process that that will come and go. And then enhanced geographic mapping, which would include perhaps drilling down to the census tract level or the block group level. The county level is great for some applications, but especially if you're working in urban areas with extension, you may want to know what's going on within a city or a county and looking at the block group or the tract level.
I was just looking at the chat, and I just wanted to mention one thing just to address this, John, is that somebody was mentioning that they were trying to explore the capabilities, but they kept coming up with having the no data available. And there was a debate whether you even put the categories in without having the data available. And some of the categories were created before we had a good handle on all of the types of data that would be freely available. In fact, some data we thought that might be able to be brought in, there were some issues with licensing or a variety of things that prevented it from being brought in. So I will say that it can be a bit frustrating if you happen to go down an area where we have not been able to get a bunch of data yet. Our decision was really to try to focus on some data and have it work well rather than a whole bunch of data that didn't work well. I would just suggest if you're just looking to explore it, do try other avenues. I have run into those situations myself. The other thing is, if you run into places and data that you would like to see, that you're looking for, there's a way to notify us and say, hey, I really want data on this, or these are the types of data layer I expect to see, because what we're hoping to do is gather information about the types of data layers people want to see for extension work inside of this tool. So,
and also throw this out there. So you may bring up your state or a nearby state and look at your counties, and there may be data available for every county, but maybe two. And you may have two counties that are, they're clear. They don't have, there's no color to them or whatever. And so this could be one of two things. It could be one, that there aren't any hogs in that county, or pigs or horses or whatever. Or two, there could be some farms, but there's really not enough to protect the privacy of the operations in that particular county. So, the USDA kind of filters those out because they don't want to invade on people's privacy. So, we haven't done anything to the data. We're just pulling it down.
all right. This is you, John, or me, whatever.
Sorry. Sleep at the wheel here. All right, so we're going to provide another overview of NEWT on Thursday, March 19th at 2 o'clock.
I think that's actually Monday.
Oh,
sorry, my bad.
All right,
March 19th is right though.
Okay, so it'll be Monday, March 19th at 2 o'clock, and it's going to be kind of a repeat of this. But the idea was, we got several inquiries. Hey, we can't make this. And we were like, well, it's recorded, but some people don't like to go to recordings. So, we're going to do this again. So feel free to, spread the word. If you think that there are people in your state or in other states that might be interested in this tool, we're just trying to get the word out there because, we're really not trying to sell this tool. We're trying to figure out if this is something that Extension needs. And if it is, let's do something about it. So, help us to spread the word.
Yeah, and the links that were mentioned before and that we used, so that current NEWT beta, that's the URL, the direct URL that we've been accessing. So it's open. Anybody who goes to that can get it. Maybe I will even try to copy these. I guess it's hard when I'm doing the presentation. Also, we're looking for feedback. So we created a survey, which should take just a couple of minutes for people to fill out to provide information about the tool, what it works, how they might use it, what things need to be there to make it more useful. And then all of the information about NEWT as it progresses, updates, links to webinars, all of that you can find on that webpage below, the mapassist.org/NEWT. So those are the three most direct links, and also on that last URL, the links back to both the NEWT beta and the feedback, or you can find, but those are maybe easy enough for people to type in directly.
And if you guys also, if you have any, I've gotten a couple of prods, if you know of any potential funding sources, RFPs coming out, that this might be appropriate for, let us know, because we're looking actively. And also, I want to acknowledge CGIT. I mean, they're not talking, but they were the brains behind this. And NEWT probably would not be here right now if it weren't for CGIT. So my hat's off to you guys. Anything else, Shane?
No, I was just going to say, do we have any other final questions? I was just going to switch back over just to show that this is the NEWT webpage here that has links to all this information. So.
Oh yeah.
So
did we get Ned's? Did we get Ned's question in Q&A about USDA?
Oops.
Yep.
Oh, can NEWT be expanded through USDA extension at the federal level?
Oh, I don't see why not. I don't see why not.
Yeah, I think we're open to all possibilities. I mean, as John mentioned, this was an idea that we had. Wouldn't it be nice if something like this existed? And so then in the end, it came down to let's figure out a way at least to build it, to show it to people and see whether or not it's useful. But obviously any project like this, in order to maintain it over time and to expand it and to act on some of these suggestions that people have, it does require some funding. So I think any options that people have or suggestions or ways in which this can enhance your work, we're open to all ideas. So.
And I think Ned's suggestion of expanding it to the USDA is a good one, because it's a national mapper. The USDA looks at at national issues. The data is consistent nationally, so it's a nice fit for something like that.
Yep. Okay. All right. Well, we don't have any other. I don't think any other specific. Excuse me, topics. I'll put these up as that last shot. Doesn't look like anything more is coming.
All right.
Great.
Well, thanks for your time.
Yes, definitely. And thanks, Mark, for coordinating this and the extension for supporting the project, because as much as John and I and CGIT did, without e-extension, this wouldn't exist in the first place. And also, thanks for being willing to host the webinar.
Sure. All righty.
Okay.
More Q&A.
Oh, the very last thing, sorry, was that the recording is going to be available. I think we might have already mentioned that, but just in case. Mark might have been about to mention that. So.
Yeah, we will. Like I say, I'll post that to Shane, and I think Shane's going to put it on his YouTube site, and it'll be on his YouTube page in addition to a link on learn.extension.org. And Ned, thank you. Ned says he plans to talk to his congressperson and U.S. senators. So
that's a good place to start, as any.
Sounds great.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.